Today we've got a 2016 Ford Focus 1.5 TDCi with roughly 58,000 miles on the clock. I'm going to have a look at the back brakes, take the wheels and the drums off, give them a good clean and adjust. The one thing you're going to need is your locking wheel nut key. It's a good idea, if it isn't your car, to ask the customer where they may have stashed the locking wheel nut key. 9 times out of 10 it'll be in the glove box. Occasionally it will be in the kitchen drawer at home, which isn't very useful. So I don't like to use an impact gun on these while they're tight. I've put the handbrake on. Alternatively, do it while the car's on the floor. Just crack it loose. That wasn't too tight anyway. So all the nuts are off and the wheel is stuck. They do corrode up and stick on the hub sometimes. Sometimes you can free them off just by continuously banging away at the tyre there. The easiest way I've found, put one nut on loose because you don't want it coming off and bouncing everywhere. I'm going to grab a bar, and then underneath I've seen people slogging away with a hammer, bashing on the wheel rims. The best way to do it, the easiest way, find somewhere solid, like this bottom part of the stub here, and just lever gently. There you go, that's the wheel loose. Now I will take that off anyway, and you'll see the corrosion that I'm talking about on the, you can see all the white corrosion. This is what was holding it on. It's a good idea just to give that a wire brush off or a bit of emery paper, and do the same on the inside of the wheel as well. All around in here, just give it a going over with a wire brush. Maybe put a little bit of grease around in there, because you can imagine if you got a puncture up the road, it wouldn't be much fun trying to get that off down a lane somewhere. An important thing to remember before you try taking the drums off and looking at the rear brakes is to make sure the handbrake is released. Because if that's on, the shoes will be pressing against the drum and you won't be able to move the drum anywhere. Right, so I need to get this drum off, and clean off some of this corrosion around here, which was holding the wheel on quite tight. I'm sure it's not going to let the drum off that easily. A little bit of penetrating oil there. You can put it around the studs as well. And you can see on here, this particular drum, it's got 2 holes in the drum with thread tapped in. You can wind 2 bolts in there which will butt up against the hub flange and pull the drum off. I'm just going to give it a tap with a hammer first to see if it will come off without that. No, that's pretty well stuck on there. think I'm going to find a couple of bolts and wind it off using these two. Right, so I've got 2 bolts. Always important to start things by hand before you start doing them up tight with a ratchet or an air gun or anything. You can see that's easing the drum off straight away. Lovely. Drum removed. A bit of dust in there, you generally find that. I will empty that in a bin in a moment. So the brake shoes, we need to make sure they're not too low. Just grab a screwdriver. So that's your friction material here. This is the metal backing of the shoe. They don't always wear perfectly even, but you can see as you look round, that's pretty even all the way around. And sometimes you'll find one shoe slightly thicker than the other. There's a leading and a trailing shoe. This one looks good. I mean, they're both pretty even, to be fair. Can't see any contamination. You can pull these rubber boots back and make sure there's no fluid in behind the dust cover, which would indicate that the hydraulic wheel cylinder's leaking. When they do start leaking behind there, they're both good, they look dry. It'll eventually start coming out, dripping on the shoes, and it'll ruin your shoes as well. So it's a good idea to catch them if they're a little bit damp behind these boots and get them replaced before it gets too bad. Also a good idea just to push this piston in, make sure it's not seized. That's nicely moving, nice and free. And the same the other side. Yeah, that's fine. So, looking at these, that's the securing clips here that hold the shoes in place. They look fine, they're not all rusty and falling apart. Everything looks as it should be. What I'll do next is give them a clean up with some brake cleaner and tweak them up with the adjuster here. So I've got my can of brake and clutch cleaner. All I'm going to do is mainly concentrate on the shoes, but we'll clean the back plate and the cylinder, adjuster and everything as well. I've got a tray on the floor to catch all the muck. That's it, just let that drip for a little while, it'll soon dry out, it evaporates very fast. And then I'll put a little bit of grease behind the shoes up the top there and have a go at adjusting them up. So what I'm doing at the moment is just levering the shoe off the back plate, put a bit of copper slip down behind the contact point. I would say these top two are the most important, because the shoes pivot at the bottom and the cylinder pushes them out at the top. Sometimes you hear a bit of a squeaky noise when you apply a handbrake, just one squeak as you pull the handbrake up and another one as it goes off. And generally it's because of this, it's running dry and a little bit rusty maybe. There are another 2 contact points, they're a little bit more difficult to get to. On each shoe there's 3 contact points in total. So there's another one midway down and one at the bottom, which you can fiddle around and try and grease, but you do run the risk of getting grease on the friction material, which you really don't want that. That's not good. So the adjustment on these shoes is done by this toothed wheel in here. Now there you will see a plate which rests against it. A spring pulls it in. The teeth are angled, so it will only let you to turn it one way, and in this case it's that way. And you can hear that plate locking in there. That stops it from de-adjusting by itself from going backwards. So when you're turning this clockwise, you're lengthening this rod in here, pushing the shoes out. So I've done a couple of clicks there. I'm pretty certain that's all this is going to need. I've already put some grease on around this hub. I'll just give it another little going over, just to help that drum to slide back over. The shoes, because I've levered them out, they won't quite be central again, so it might take a bit of wriggling around to get that on. And as you can hear, the shoe is just skimming on the drum, so that's good. I'd say that's about right. It still spins freely. So all that's left to do now is pop the wheel back on, which I'll do now. Okay, that's good. I will repeat the procedure on the other side, check all the wheel nuts for tightness once the vehicle's on the floor. So now we're back on the ground, handbrake on. Just make sure these are nipped up. That's the locking one, that's why they're sticking out so far. There will be tightening torques for wheel bolts, usually around about 110 Newton meters. It does vary from one manufacturer to the other, but not everybody's got a torque wrench handy. Just got to be sensible and make sure they're all nipped like that. I'll carry on and check the other side, and then it's good to go.